What? That sounds terrible.
It was pretty well written, I thought.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Remove all the senses.
Remove all of his senses. Remove his ability to see, hear, or experience the outside world in any way. Gateway of the mind is what it's called.
Yeah. Well, that'd be weird. So then all you got's your mind, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I heard there were experiments they took out horse brains. I think it was around the fucking 40s or something. But they took out no, it was a dog brain, sorry, and they attached it to a blood supply in a horse's arteries, and they were able to keep the brain functioning for a fair while outside of the head. But if it was experiencing anything, it would have probably been similar to that, having no senses.
Oh, that's a long poster. Oh, it's not that long.
There it is. There's the creepypasta. Called Gateway of the Mind.
About the man he stepped on a landmine and as a result couldn't see, no limbs left. It's actually the book Metallica's War.
All right. So this sounds like the ultimate deprivation chamber experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where,
but basically permanent.
Yeah.
And it's a creepypasta. It's not a real thing, but I thought it was a neat little story. Neat little idea.
It's not too far out of the realm. It's not too far out of the realm of possibility, though. I mean, have you heard about these head transplant experiments that are possibly coming up soon?
Oh yeah, they're doing that.
No, I have not.
Head transplant? Like putting somebody else's head on another body?
A more appropriate name would be body transplant, really.
It would make more sense. But this was already done with monkeys decades ago, but we couldn't reattach the spinal cord. That was the main problem. Mm-hmm. But there are scientists now that are proposing a method for reattaching the spinal cord if you cut it in a controlled way. Like we can't repair injury, but if we sever it ourselves, we can reattach it. If that makes sense.
I could see them eventually figuring out how to splice nerves together.
Well, it was done with the monkeys. It was just paralyzed.
Yeah, they switched the head onto monkeys.
That's nuts. Well, that definitely would be interesting.
I'm pretty sure we are capable of keeping a brain alive outside of a skull, and that would pretty much be life without any kind of senses, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I'd imagine that the person would kind of slowly start going a little bit insane because so much of our conscious state is dependent on input. I mean, like phantom limbs, phantom pains, things like that. So the mind would start to try to fill in what was missing, but there's so much to fill in. You have a whole body that has to be replaced.
Right.
Yeah,
even the absence of hormones from your organs would make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's like there's so much that you imagine how quiet it would be. Like you wouldn't have your heart or your even not even your heart or your breathing. Like if you ever go to a deprivation chamber or something like that, at least you got that. That's all that you got. But here you don't even have that. Oh, yeah.
You seen Ghost in the Shell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think where that's where we're slowly moving towards transhumanism, where we can start putting the brain into other bodies, robotic bodies, or eventually maybe putting our consciousness into a computer.
Yeah. I think that'll be kind of the ideal way to go, because from what I understand, a lot of the science right now tells us that the body and the brain are really intricately connected. That there is obviously there's so much going on subconsciously to keep us going. I mean, it seems like most of our brain is busy running the body. So what is all that going to do if the body suddenly goes missing?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm actually reading a book right now called Permutation City,
Permutation City.
and that's the name of the book. And in the book, we're at a point in technology where the brain, where the human brain can be simulated on the computer, but the algorithms to do it are such that that even with the best possible computers, you're still at a factor of 15. So the simulated human is experiencing time 15 times more slowly than actual time at that point in technology. And the main thing actually is for people that have fatal illnesses or whatever, they get their consciousness uploaded to the machines, is paying for the processing time to run them. We're at this point. There's basically a global exchange for processing power. That where people can automatically bid for and pay for processing power on various servers around the world whenever it's cheap enough. But again, so they talk about like a guy who, one of the characters is a guy who was uploaded to, who had a life insurance policy to upload his consciousness to the cloud when he had a fatal accident. Only he doesn't have all that much money, so he's often being simulated at 30 or 60 times slowdown or more, and sometimes when processing power gets too expensive because of the ups and downs of the market, then there are just times when his processor, when his consciousness isn't being simulated at all, he winks out for a while, and of course he doesn't experience anything during that. He just whenever it gets cheap enough, his simulation starts running again. So it's all pretty chilling. And again, just good, a good simulation, or a good idea about what a possible future might be like, even if transhumanism is possible.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I've thought a bit about that idea. I've always come to
Permutation City.
Right. I've always come to the conclusion that you couldn't really transfer your brain into a computer. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't necessarily be you. I feel like your own experience would still stop, and the simulation would be a different awareness.
Well, are you a monist? Do you believe that there's some supernatural substance component to the human mind?
No, I'm not convinced of that. I'm open to it. I used to believe it, I guess.
So in the absence of that, then I don't see how it's not you, right? Which is to say, it's not like there's some sort of first-person unity of experience even within the human brain, right? I mean, we fall unconscious, or the brain ceases operating from second to second, and then we perceive there as being, we perceive a connection to our past memories, but then again, if you started simulating yourself on the computer, then it would have the same perceived connection to past memories too. I don't, in the absence, if you don't believe that there's some sort of soul or something that generates any sort of continuity, I don't see how it's meaningfully different. Whether your mind is being simulated on physical ware, on a brain, or being simulated in a computer, seems to be the same.
It's not meaningful, but I'm just saying that I don't think it would be a direct continuation for you personally. I think, depending on how the process works, I don't think it's going to be like me, in the way that my experience is continuing now from one moment to the next. I don't feel like this simulation will be a
Yeah, in what way is
continuation
your
of my own.
experience? In what way is your experience continuing now from one point to the next? Can you describe in physical terms, in something other than spiritual terms, how it is that you are actually the same being that you were yesterday? Can you prove continuity
Well,
there
purely,
between today and
I
yesterday?
mean, there's a physical continuity, but I'm talking more about from my own perspective.
Yeah.
It's a series of
right, but from
there's a
your own
series of
perspective,
observations.
right, but your own perspective, the only reason that you have continuity in your own perspective is memory. It has nothing. There's no physical connection between your experiences now and your experiences last week. Okay, there's not any sort of physical tunnel or storm or four-dimensional string or something that attaches those two things. The only
Okay,
reason
right.
that you perceive continuity between experiences today and last week is your memory. That's why
Okay,
you perceive it as the same.
I think
See
I
what I'm saying?
understand what you're saying. I do. I think I do understand what you're saying. But
Yeah.
let me ask you this: if the this process would it allow me to create the simulation while I'm still alive?
So what? I don't. Again, I don't see why not, and I don't see how one would be more or less you than the other.
Yeah.
Well, it just wouldn't. Okay, if I can create the simulation and I'm still alive, then at that moment I can walk outside and experience something, and that simulation can go about experiencing different things, and our experiences will no
Something
longer be
different,
shared.
yeah.
And in that sense, we're
That's
not
true.
the same thing. You know what I mean?
Well, but it still stands that you of the past. I mean, you were made of different cells, different. So materially, you were different. You had different thoughts. So you're not really the same. The only thing that's really keeping you is this continuity that there is no abrupt change. And we can put forth
And
dilemmas. Like for example, if you were cloned while you were sleeping, and the original you was terminated, and you woke up, and you kept walking. So you're not aware of this. You're not aware of this. You keep walking. So is that still the same you?
Isn't an
Or-
immediate clone.
Really quick, can someone catch me up as to the
Wait.
philosophical question that we're asking here? Because I understand that there's some kind of metaphysical conversation going on, but there's this reference to this simulation hypothesis, and I'm not following.
We're talking about the idea we're talking about the idea of downloading a personality into a computer to allow like a continuation of their mind after death, I suppose.
we're I guess we're really talking about the circumstances for continuity of experience. Perhaps is kind of the big question right now. Most importantly, there was some concern that if you download your consciousness into a computer, that something that thinks it's you would experience that, but your experiences would cease, and this other thing is somehow different than you, or is a different set of experiences than you.
I think that stands, but you also brought up a good point that there's no real continuity in my own experiences, and I've thought to myself before that I've heard someone say, I don't know how true this is, but every 7 years we completely replace every
every atom in your body.
That was a
atom of
Bone
our
Cells
body.
video that mentioned that.
So in that sense, I'm a completely different organism or set of atoms that I was at birth, and I have memory of experiences from that time, but I'm not.
Well, not necessarily
there's
entirely
not really
different
a
set of
direct.
atoms. Just different cells is what it would be. Your atoms are just repurposed. They could still be there.
Yeah, and,
every single cell in your body.
And more meaningfully, I would take the tact that when we fall unconscious and go to sleep, basically, particularly during the times when we're not dreaming, which is most of our sleep cycle, that the conscious parts of the brain are shut down. When we wake up in the morning, we reboot those parts. We sort of reinitialize our self-conception from our memory, And I would say that in a very real way, that person that wakes up is not the same. It's not. There's no continuity of experience between the person that woke up and the person that went to bed. Again, I would say it's the person that wakes up sees continuity only again because that person's self-image is due to memory, and it is not meaningfully different whether the person wakes up having had some sort of physical continuity, or whether the person wakes up having had copied or implanted memories. It doesn't really make any difference.
This is kind of related.
So maybe then
that's right, but like it could be gone to a farther point, saying the me from right now isn't the me from right now. Me from like what I said right now wasn't the same me from what I said right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even right and now, or any point in time.
So I guess the next question is, what's the objection?
Well, I think the objection comes when we talk about I think again the concern comes because we have self-preservation. Okay, we want to continue to exist. The concern comes if I have my consciousness downloaded to a machine and my physical body destroyed, or I have to have my consciousness moved to a machine because my physical body is dying. Say, am I really preserving me or not? That is why this is an important question to people, is because because I want to know that I'm going to continue experiencing things, and that my consciousness won't just cease and somebody else is continuing to experience things.
I don't think you can answer that question unless
I agree.
First answer the question, what does it mean to be me? Like, what does it mean to be a human being?
Yeah, and I think the issue is that even though we recognize, even if we accept monism and we accept the idea that we are just a process running on hardware, and that there's no metaphysical thing beyond that we are, I think even when we do, we still have this notion of a first-person experience, which we're concerned is somehow not preserved, if we make a transfer of this kind.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I don't know that the idea of this first-person experience is even coherent, we still have it. I mean, we still have this notion.
What I mean to propose is that I think we're getting the cart in front of the horse here. I don't think you can even have a coherent concept of what it means to be you, except from the Christian perspective of personhood. So if you start with this idea of first-person perspective, I think we're getting the cart in front of the horse, because I don't think you can even have a cogent idea of what it means to have a first-hand account of something outside of a biblical anthropology.
There were first-person perspectives before there was a Christian ideology. I mean, one is, part of the human experience, and one's more of a proposition.
Okay, but Slang, that presupposes a non-Christian view of history. If Christianity is false, and Adam and Eve didn't exist...
I'm not presupposing a non-Christian worldview. The burden of proof is on the Christian worldview.
I didn't say it wasn't, but what I said was you are presupposing a non-Christian view of history, because you're assuming...
No, I don't think I am.
Well, let me finish what I was going to say, because I will explain why you were doing that. You're saying that there were historical concepts of first-person experience prior to a Christian idea of the matter. That's not true if Christianity is true. That's only true if it's false. If Christianity is false, then we would be able to believe in things, for example, like earlier religions or earlier cultures than that of the creation concept in Genesis. However, if Christianity is true, that is not the case, and the worship of the Christian God is the oldest type of religion in history, And so again, it's only if you presuppose that Christianity is false that you can view history as allowing for the possibility that there are older views of humanity than the one that's given it by God in the Genesis account.
You do realize that
Yeah,
there are Christians that don't believe that the world started with Adam and Eve directly.
There are quite a few of us, actually.
Okay, I don't support that view. I will be defending a different point of view.
Even so, saying it's the Christian worldview is not entirely accurate.
Yeah,
I think it is. I think if you look at Orthodox Christianity throughout history,
it's the real Christian.
No, I'm not saying it's the real Christian. I'm not saying you're not a real Christian if you don't believe this. I'm just saying the church, since the days of the apostles, have held that there is merit to creation, and this is constantly being argued from the words of Jesus himself. But I don't even think I have to defend that Adam and Eve were actual people, or that there was a 6-day creation, or because I'm not a young Earth creationist to begin with. All I'm saying is, whatever the Bible does propound in terms of Adam and Eve's or mankind's being created in the Imago Dei, that is indispensable to our metaphysic.
Yeah, what he's saying is the broader Christian perspective. Okay, not even necessarily including a literal Adam and Eve or a literal Genesis. The broader Christian perspective is still that God's relationship with man is primary.
Right.
And so there's no that there then I do think Christianity generally would reject the idea of some primitive religion that sort of antedates and eventually grows into the actual genuine relationship between God and man. Instead, we would say the relationship between God and man is primary, and whatever sort of quote unquote primitive religions that we observe historically, in prehistory, would be either examples of that or somehow a devolution of that.
I guess what I'm a little bit confused about is I don't quite understand how having these beliefs somehow grounds your view of continual existence.
Yeah, I don't see how it does either.
Sure, I'd be happy to explain. So, it's extremely important to take into mind what Adam just said in terms of the relationship between God and man. On the Christian view of anthropology, humans have a metaphysical relationship to God, such that there is a human or creaturely mode of doing things like God. Right? We're made in the image of God. That means we're made in His likeness. There is some kind of similitude. So when we predicate about God certain things, sometimes we can predicate similarities between man and God. So if I say, for example, that God is good, I can also say that a man is good, and there is it's not nonsense, right? There's an intelligible relationship between those two sentences. So when we come to having a metaphysic of man, what the Christian propounds is that man is made in the image of God, and since God is supremely rational, since God has a coherent, I think, Dex, the word you like to use is a coherent model of the entire universe, so man can have a rational relationship to the world. Man can classify and categorize his experience and make sense of it, as opposed to what I think with the far opposite would be is that we're living in Hume's impressionistic sensation world.
Man has the capability to understand things, like that's axiomatic. You're presupposing the explanation that it's because God made us. I don't see how that's justified.
Well, okay, but that's the issue, Slang, is if you're taking it axiomatically that your faculties of reasoning are trustworthy, that they're reliable, then that's just holding yourself as an infallible rule of interpretation. That you're holding yourself as an
You don't have
infallible
to
rule.
take it. You don't have to take it axiomatically. You can evaluate it empirically.
But how would you go about by what category or principle would you go about interpreting the empirical?
Experience.
No, but you can't use reason to evaluate reason. To ask to do that is really an impossible task.
You can use experience. You can use actual observation to evaluate reason.
No.
Yeah, you can.
No, that's using reason to evaluate reason.
It's not using reason
Yes,
to
it
evaluate
is.
reason. No, it's not. It's experimenting on reason. It's what
With
you
reason.
do is well,
You wouldn't be able to
no.
interpret it without
Look,
reason.
you evaluate. You can run an experiment to evaluate whether something works or not. Okay, if we want to know whether reason works, we can apply reason and see if the result of reason is one that fits with what we're experiencing or not.
Right.
We can do that with reason just like we can with and the thing is we do this, and sometimes we come up with the idea, well that doesn't end up actually working, and when we do, then we change or discard or refine our reason, whatever principle of reason didn't work, and adopt a different one. We've been doing this for hundreds of years.
Right.
Really quick. Let me make a distinction, because in many of the conversations about reasoning or testing reasoning, there's a huge equivocation that goes on. My argument is not to speak about whether or not we can reason to the defense of reason, right? In other words, I'm not saying, or rather, my argument is not that because you must invoke the use of reason in order to defend the use of reason, that your arguments would be impossible or they would be invalid. That's not my argument. What my argument is that the faculty of reasoning, or the concept of reasoning, is, if we take that axiomatically, then that is by definition saying that the faculty that we own, namely reason, is infallible, because we're just going to take it axiomatically. We're just going to take it at first glance. We're not going to question our faculties.
To say that it's infallible, once again, is using the ruler to measure a ruler. So I don't think we take it as infallible. I think we just take it as is. We reason, period. And what I think Adam was talking about is with reason we make predictions about things, and when those predictions come true to our experience, that is a success to us. That's what we call success.
But we find ourselves in an experience where we're capable of reason, and there is an explanation for that, but you can't just presuppose that the only possible explanation is God.
According to your axiomatic take of reason, right? The faculty of reasoning.
Yeah, and your axiomatic take as well. It's not just ours.
No, you
I'd say
claim it's my
it's your
axiomatic
reasoning
take.
as well. I mean,
Right, that's what you
lead to reason.
Right,
Our
that's
actions lead to reason. God is nothing to do with it.
That's what you assert, but what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that that's self-defeating, because if you hold that your capability of reasoning is axiomatic, then you're saying that you are in and of yourself an infallible source of truth, and that's
right. And
ridiculous.
do you have a non-axiomatic justification for reasoning?
I'm not
induction, of course.
I'm not. You're strawmanning my argument. As I already explicated, I am not arguing that axioms are problematic. What I am arguing is that our axiom cannot be grounded in some kind of faculties of our own, because then that would hold that every time that I think my faculty is incorrect, I'm only doing so by my own faculty.
Sure.
So I'm, again, just holding that my own faculty is infallible.
You do have to have circular reasoning. I mean, there is no way to avoid this.
Can I try? How about we presuppose our reasoning not to be absolutely correct all the time, but simply accurate as a starting axiom. There we go.
No, once again, reasoning
Welcome
is
to
a tool
Sydney.
that we use to evaluate this world. Okay, it's the ruler. Okay, when something is correct is when, like, on the ruler, you use the ruler to measure and you say, well, it's 10 centimeters. Okay, that's what we say by correct. But you can never actually use the whole ruler to say the ruler is correct.
Right.
It simply is. So.
But
When we're talking about truths, when we're talking about something being correct or false, we are using it within the context of what reason does for us. So reason as a whole system is not true or false. It simply is.
right, but what I'm
It
I
creates
agree with you.
conclusions that are true or false.
Well, what I'm
within itself.
what I'm suggesting, Dex, is that first of all, there's no such thing as this, and I know you're not propounding this, Dex, but I don't. Again, the language here is easy to equivocate. So I'll just elaborate here, like you just did. There's no such thing as a reason in itself. There's no. We're not trying to reify reason as if it's some object out there, like a Platonic ruler that you can measure things. When we're talking about reason, we're talking about each individual's own faculty to regard the world such that he can classify it propositionally, and he can make inferences based on different connections between those propositions. Right? It's a good, but it's a rough estimation of what it means to have a faculty of reason. Okay. What I'm saying is, one, it's not rational to hold one's own faculty of reasoning as an axiom. In other words, in terms of epistemology, that cannot be your starting point. That cannot be your ultimate justification or your ultimate authority. Whether with whatever qualifications you want to make, it wouldn't matter. Shoot, I just forgot your name. Dex. It wouldn't matter because when you make those qualifications, you're only doing them in light of the axiom itself. So if my axiom has to do or is grounded on the faculty of my own reasoning, then it's just by the faculty of my own reasoning that I am making qualifications about it. So I would basically just be appealing to my own words every time I say something. Why is this true? Oh, well, because I think it is.
But isn't that what truth is? I mean, it is basically when you have the correct model that corresponds to experience. That's what we call truth. I mean, and all that matters is what's true to us, in a sense. So I don't really see how this is an issue. I mean, let's say we come up with some sort of with an answer, and yes, that answer is within the context of reason, and that's all we have, unfortunately. So I don't think it's so much an axiom. It's just it is. We do reason, and when we call something truth, it's when there's congruence and correspondence, and that's it. And we judge that there's congruence and correspondence by the experience of congruence and correspondence, and that's sort of it. And that's what we. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you didn't.
Okay, what I'm suggesting is that I think that idea of correspondence and coherence is rather irrelevant if my only judge of correspondence and coherence is my own faculty. That would be epistemological anarchism. It would just be subjectivism. Well, I think that this is true, therefore that's my only take on whether or not it's true or not. And the other person could come up to me and say, well, I have completely different judgments about the matter, and that's all we have is just our say-so.
Right. Well,
Are you doing the same thing?
Well, I mean, but no matter what, we're still stuck with, presupposing that there is an objective reality that me and the other person share. We still end up presupposing that the other person actually has a mind, and that we could somehow come to an agreement. So yeah, basically, I don't really see how you can avoid the idea that we might be the only mind in existence, and everything else is sort of contingent upon what we think. So no, you can't avoid that.
Right, right, and I agree with you. But what I'm trying to point out is I think that's an inconsistency on the part of the system that you're propounding, Dex. Because I agree with you that with a lot of what you're saying about how um, we can only deal with the models that we have of reality, and our faculty of reasoning acts as a measuring rod. But the problem is that when that's our starting point, when that's our axiom, our own faculty of reasoning, each individual for his own faculty. The problem then is that when we have conversations like this, they become absurd because what we're trying to do is come to an agreement about an extramental state of affairs about the way our minds work, right? We're trying to say, this is the way our reasoning works, this is how things go about, so on and so forth, okay? The problem is
Right.
that if my faculty of reasoning is my starting point, I can just say, well, I reasoned that you're all wrong, and therefore I'm right. There would be no, and you could say the same thing, and we would be stuck in this in this sort of Wittgensteinian shouting match from each of our ivory towers, you know.
Well, you could be dishonest, but if it doesn't match your own experience, then you would know it not to be true. But I see, this is the way I feel about it is that I think therefore I am is a much better starting point than I think therefore Jesus. I mean, isn't that basically what you're saying?
No, I think any starting point that starts with I think is problematic. I think therefore I am, I think is a terrible starting point. All it's saying is I am, therefore I am.
Okay, Jimmy, but how do you start without thinking? How do you even propose presuppositions without thinking?
Right, and this is what I was trying to point out before, Art, is that I'm not saying defend reason without reasoning. I'm saying defend reason without using the faculty of reason as your starting point. I don't care if you reason about your starting point, but your starting point cannot be the faculty of reason, because that would mean we have to treat reason itself, i.e. each individual's faculty, as infallible. But we know that's not the case.
Well, I proposed just a few minutes ago that I do not assume that my reasoning is infallible. It's just accurate to a degree, and the way I find out if it's completely accurate, let's say, is that I test it against reality, which is what truth is in my view. Also, that assumes my senses to be correct. Yes, that's one of my presuppositions as well.